Commander Lisa Hayes stood at the observation deck of the monitoring station, watching the distant stars through the thick glass. The station orbited around a blue and green planet called Kepler 442b, far from Earth and far from most other worlds. 3 months had passed since the last supply ship visited, and 3 more months would pass before Earth would make its first official contact with alien races. Lisa thought about her home planet often during these quiet times. The monitoring station was not very big, but it was important. Representatives from different alien species worked together here, watching space for any unusual signals or threats. Lisa was the only human on the station, serving as an observer and learning about other species before the big first contact event. She had been here for almost a year now, and she was getting used to the strange but friendly faces around her. Zarathel walked up behind Lisa, her pointed ears and graceful movements making almost no sound. The elf woman was very old, maybe 300 years, but she looked young like most of her people. Her silver hair was tied back, and her green eyes showed wisdom that came from centuries of experience. She had been working with different species for longer than Lisa had been alive. "Any word from the communications center?" Lisa asked without turning around. "Kithara detected something unusual about an hour ago," Zarathel replied, her voice carrying a slight musical quality that all elves seemed to have. "She wants us to come look at what she found." Lisa nodded and followed Zarathel through the narrow corridors of the station. The walls were made of a metal that changed color slightly depending on who was looking at it, a technology that Lisa still did not fully understand. They passed a few other alien workers, including a tall blue-skinned being who nodded politely and a small furry creature that was carrying some kind of device. The communications center was the largest room on the station, filled with screens and equipment that could detect signals from across the galaxy. Kithara stood in the center of it all, her reptilian features focused intently on a series of displays. She was about as tall as Lisa, with dark green scales that shimmered under the lights. Her species had natural psychic abilities that made them excellent at understanding communications, even when the technology or language was completely unknown. "What did you find?" Lisa asked as they approached. Kithara turned toward them, her large yellow eyes showing concern. "A transmission from your solar system, but not from Earth. It came from somewhere between the outer planets. The signal is very weak and mostly scrambled, but there are emotions attached to it that I can sense." "Emotions?" Lisa asked. "Fear," Kithara replied simply. "Great fear and desperation. Whoever sent this message was terrified of something." Zarathel moved closer to look at the displays. "Can you decode any of the actual message?" "I am trying, but human encryption is different from what we usually work with. It will take time." Kithara's clawed fingers moved quickly over the control panels, adjusting frequencies and running different analysis programs. Lisa felt a cold feeling in her stomach. If there was a human ship out there in distress, they needed to know about it immediately. "How long do you think it will take?" "Maybe a few hours if I am lucky. Maybe longer if the damage to the signal is too great." "Keep working on it," Lisa said. "I will contact Earth Command and let them know we detected something." But as Kithara continued working, her expression became more troubled. She would stop suddenly, tilt her head as if listening to something. Nobody else could hear, then shake her head and continue. Lisa had learned that when psychic species acted this way, it usually meant something important was happening. After 3 hours of work, Kithara suddenly straightened up. "I have it," she said, but her voice was quiet and worried. The main screen flickered and then displayed text that made Lisa's blood run cold. The message was from a human exploration vessel called the Star Walker, and it described an encounter with something that should not have existed. "Unknown hostile entities detected in Sector 77 Alpha," the message read. "Entities appear to be non-corporeal but capable of draining ship power and crew life force. Multiple casualties. They pass through our hull like it is not there. Weapons have no effect. Captain Morrison is dead. Chief Engineer Rodriguez aged IU 30 years and 30 seconds. We are trying to escape, but they are following us. If anyone receives this message, warn Earth. Do not come to these coordinates. Do not trust the empty space between stars. Something lives there, and it is hungry. Lisa." stared at the message, reading it again and again. This cannot be real. Zarathel had gone very still beside her, and when Lisa looked at the elf woman's face, she saw something she had never seen before. Zarathel looked terrified. "What is it?" Lisa asked. "Void feeders," Zarathel whispered. "The ancient enemy of my people. We thought they were all destroyed long ago." "What are void feeders?" Zarathel sat down heavily in a nearby chair, her usual grace forgotten. "Creatures that exist partially outside normal space and time. They feed on life force and energy, growing stronger with each victim. My people fought them thousands of years ago, and we barely survived. Most of our worlds were destroyed before we found a way to drive them back." Cathara was still reading the emotional traces in the message. "The fear I sensed was not just from the immediate danger. There was also knowledge, terrible knowledge about what was coming." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "The humans who sent." This message knew that these creatures were not just randomly hunting. They were following a specific path, moving towards something. Lisa felt the cold in her stomach spread through her whole body. "Toward what?" "Toward Earth," Zarathel said quietly. "They are drawn to large concentrations of life and technology. Earth, with billions of humans, and all of your advancing technology, would be like a beacon to them." Lisa looked at the timestamp on the message. It had been sent 4 months ago, which meant it had taken a month to reach them even at faster-than-light communication speeds. The first contact ceremony was scheduled to happen in 3 months, right in the path between Earth and the outer colonies. "We have to warn them," Lisa said. "The warning will take 2 months to reach Earth even with our fastest communication systems," Zarathel replied. "And even if it gets there in time, will your people believe it?" Lisa thought about the politicians and military leaders back on Earth. All of them focused on making a good first impression with alien species. Would they believe a warning about ancient monsters that could walk through walls and drain people's lives away? "We have to try," Lisa said. But as she looked at the message again, one thing became clear. Even if Earth believed the warning, even if they prepared for the right kind of threat, it might already be too late. The Void Feeders had a 4-month head start, and they were moving toward the most populated system in human space. The warning would come too late. The Council of Worlds meeting chamber was located on a massive space station that floated in neutral territory, far from any single species' home system. The chamber itself was enormous, designed to accommodate the different sizes and environmental needs of dozens of alien species. When Zarathel called for an emergency session, representatives from across the galaxy dropped everything and came as quickly as they could travel. Admiral Kate Morrison sat in the human delegation area, her crisp, blue uniform standing out among the varied clothing and natural features of the alien representatives around her. She was a practical woman who had spent her entire career preparing for this moment when humanity would join the galactic community. She did not like surprises, and she especially did not like delays. "This is ridiculous," Admiral Morrison said to Dr. Amy Chen, who sat beside her taking notes on a small device. "We have been preparing for first contact for 5 years. Every detail has been planned and tested. Now they want to change everything because of some ghost story." Dr. Chen was younger than the Admiral, with a background in xenobiology that had made her one of Earth's leading experts on alien life forms. She had been studying the data that came from the monitoring station all morning, and she was not as certain as Admiral Morrison that the threat could be dismissed. "The emotional readings from the transmission are very strong," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Cathara's species is known for their accuracy in psychic analysis. If she says the crew of the Starwalker was terrified, then something terrible happened. To them, fear is not evidence," Admiral Morrison replied. "Space is dangerous. Ships are lost all the time for many different reasons." At the center of the chamber, Elder Miraleth stood to address the assembly. The ancient elf woman was over 1,000 years old, and her white hair and lined face showed the weight of centuries. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the large space without any amplification. "I call this session to order," Elder Miraleth said. "We are here because of a warning received by our monitoring station about a threat to the first contact protocols. Zarathel will present the evidence." Zarathel moved to the speaker's platform and activated the holographic display system. The message from the Starwalker appeared in the air above the assembly, along with Kithara's analysis of the emotional content and technical details about the transmission. As Zarathel explained what they had discovered, the chamber became very quiet. Some of the older representatives began to look worried, while others seemed confused or skeptical. Admiral Morrison noticed that several of the alien species were exchanging glances that suggested they knew something about what was being described. The creatures described in this message match ancient records from the Void Feeder Wars, Zarathel continued. My people fought these beings 3,000 years ago. They nearly destroyed our civilization before we found ways to fight them. A representative from the insectoid species called Quensara stood up to speak. The creature was about 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and large compound eyes that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. When it spoke, the voice came from a translation device because its natural communication was through chemical signals. The hive mind has experienced disturbances in the outer regions, Quenzara said. Scout swarms have gone silent in areas where no threats were detected. We thought it was equipment failure, but the pattern matches what is being described. Dr. Chen leaned forward in her seat. This was new information that supported the warning from the monitoring station. Admiral Morrison stood up to address the chamber. Even if we accept that something dangerous is out there, changing the first contact protocols now would be a disaster. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for years. Our entire fleet is already moving toward the meeting coordinates. We cannot just turn around and run from something we have never seen. Elder Miraleth's ancient eyes focused on Admiral Morrison. You speak like someone who has never faced extinction. Your species is young and strong and confident. This is good, but it can also be dangerous. Are you saying humans cannot handle whatever is out there? Admiral Morrison asked, her voice rising slightly. I am saying that confidence without wisdom leads to death, Elder Miraleth replied calmly. Let me show you what confidence cost my people. The holographic display changed to show images from the ancient elf archives. The pictures were old and grainy, but they clearly showed beautiful elf cities and space stations being drained of all life and energy. Ships floated dead in space, their crews aged to dust in seconds. Planets that had once been green and full of life became gray and empty. We lost 60% of our population in the first year, Elder Miraleth said. We thought our magic and technology made us strong enough to fight anything. We were wrong. Dr. Chen was taking rapid notes as she watched the images. The destruction shown was complete and terrible, but there were also pictures of elf warriors fighting the void feeders using weapons and techniques that seemed to affect the creatures. How did you finally stop them? Dr. Chen asked. We learned to fight them on multiple dimensional planes at once, Elder Miraleth replied. We created weapons that could affect beings that existed partially outside normal space. And we sacrificed entire star systems to trap the largest swarms and destroy them. Admiral Morrison was not impressed. Human technology is far more advanced now than elf technology was 3,000 years ago. What worked against you might not work against us. Several alien representatives began speaking at once, their voices creating a confusing mixture of sounds and translation devices. Some supported Admiral Morrison's position, believing that modern technology and cooperation between species could handle any threat. Others supported Elder Miraleth, believing that the ancient warnings should be taken seriously. During the chaos, Dr. Chen stood up and activated her own data display. I have been analyzing disappearances in the human outer colonies over the past 6 months, she said loudly enough to get everyone's attention. 17 small research stations have gone silent. All of them were in the same general region where the Starwalker sent its last message. The chamber became quiet again. As Dr. Chen showed her data, the pattern was clear when displayed visually. The disappearances formed a rough line pointing directly toward Earth's solar system. This is not random equipment failure, Dr. Chen continued. Something is moving through that region of space, and it is headed toward our most populated areas. Quenzara spoke again. The hive mind agrees with the human scientist. Our lost swarms were in similar locations. The pattern suggests deliberate movement rather than random hunting. Admiral Morrison looked at the data display, and for the first time she seemed less certain. Even if something is out there, we cannot change the first contact protocols without a unanimous vote from all species. That is the law of the Council. Elder Miraleth nodded sadly. That is correct. The protocols can only be changed if every species agrees. Zarathel looked around the chamber, counting representatives. She could see that while many believed the threat was real, others were still skeptical or had political reasons for not wanting to delay first contact. Getting a unanimous vote would be impossible. Then we vote, Elder Miraleth said. The voting process took 2 hours. Each species had to discuss the issue internally before casting their decision. In the end, the result was exactly what Zarathel had feared. 2/3 of the species voted to change the protocols and delay first contact until the threat could be investigated. 1/3 voted to continue with the original plan. The motion fails, Elder Miraleth announced. First contact will proceed, as scheduled. Admiral Morrison stood up, looking satisfied. Humanity appreciates the concern of our future allies, but we are confident in our ability to handle any challenges we might face. As the Admiral left the chamber with the rest of the human delegation, Dr. Chen lingered behind. She approached. Zarathel and Elder Miraleth. I believe you, Dr. Chen said quietly. Is there anything we can do to prepare, even if the protocols cannot be changed? Zarathel and Elder Miraleth exchanged glances. Very little, Elder Miraleth replied. The weapons and techniques that work against void feeders require knowledge that your people do not have, and training that takes years to complete. But we can try to send additional warnings, Zarathel added, and we can make sure that when the attack comes, some of your people will know what they are facing. Dr. Chen nodded. Send me everything you have about these creatures. I will study it and share it with people who might listen. As the chamber emptied, the 3 women stood together, knowing that they had just witnessed a decision that could lead to disaster. Somewhere in the dark space between stars, ancient enemies were moving toward a confrontation that humanity was not prepared for. The warning had been given, but it had not been believed. Soon, the price of that disbelief would become clear. Captain Rachel Torres stood on the bridge of the Earth starship Liberty, watching the view screen as they approached the coordinates for humanity's first official contact with alien civilizations. The fleet around her was impressive, consisting of 12 ships representing the best of human technology and the finest crews Earth could provide. Each ship carried diplomats, scientists, and cultural representatives who would help establish peaceful relations with the galactic community. Contact in 30 minutes, reported Lieutenant Maya Johnson from her tactical station. Maya was young but experienced, having served on deep space missions for 3 years before being selected for this historic mission. She was monitoring the sensor readings that showed dozens of alien ships waiting at the meeting point. How are our diplomatic preparations? Captain Torres asked the communications officer. Ready, Captain. We have gifts representing human culture, art, and technology. The translation systems have been tested and are working perfectly. Ambassador Williams is in the main conference room reviewing her presentation one final time. Captain Torres nodded, feeling proud of her crew and her species. This was the moment that would change human history forever. After centuries of wondering whether they were alone in the universe, humanity was about to join a community of intelligent species that spanned the galaxy. The first contact protocol was supposed to be simple and peaceful. The human fleet would arrive at the designated coordinates in the neutral zone, a region of space between major alien territories. There would be formal ceremonies where each species would present themselves and exchange basic information about their cultures and technologies. After that, more detailed negotiations could begin about trade, territorial boundaries, and mutual cooperation. Alien ships coming into visual range, Maya reported. The view screen changed to show the alien fleet, and Captain Torres felt her breath catch. The ships were beautiful and strange, with designs unlike anything humans had ever imagined. Some were organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. Others were geometric and crystalline, reflecting light in patterns that seemed almost alive. A few ships appeared to be made entirely of energy, with no solid matter visible at all. Incoming transmission from the alien fleet, the communications officer reported. Put it on screen. The view screen switched to show a chamber filled with representatives from different alien species. Captain Torres recognized some of them from the briefing materials Earth had received, but seeing them in person was still amazing. There were tall, graceful beings with pointed ears who must be elves, reptilian creatures with large eyes, insectoid beings with multiple arms, and several species that she could not identify at all. A figure stepped forward to speak. It was an elf woman with silver hair and green eyes, wearing flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. "Greetings, people of Earth," the elf woman said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "I am Zarathel, speaking for the Council of Worlds. We welcome you to the galactic community and look forward to learning about your culture and achievements." Captain Torres activated her own transmission system. "Thank you, Zarathel. I am Captain Rachel Torres, representing the United Earth Fleet. We are honored to meet you and excited to begin this new chapter in human history." The formal ceremonies began exactly as planned. Each species took turns presenting information about their homeworlds, their achievements in science and art, and their hopes for the future. The humans presented a collection of music from different Earth cultures, samples of human literature translated into galactic standard language, and demonstrations of their most advanced technologies. The alien representatives seemed impressed by human achievements, especially by how quickly humanity had developed space travel and how diverse their cultures were despite coming from a single planet. Several species commented on human creativity and adaptability, traits that were apparently rare in the galaxy. For 2 hours, everything went perfectly. Captain Torres began to relax, thinking that first contact was going to be exactly the peaceful and hopeful event that Earth had dreamed about. Then the sensors started detecting something wrong. "Captain," Maya called from her station, her voice tight with concern. "I am reading some kind of energy disturbance approaching from Sector 7. Multiple contacts, but the readings do not match any known technology." Captain Torres moved to look at Maya's displays. The sensor readings were confusing and contradictory. The contacts appeared to be ships, but they were not reflecting light or heat the way normal ships should. They seemed to be there and not there at the same time. "Are they part of the alien fleet?" Captain Torres asked. "Negative, Captain. The alien ships are all accounted for, and these contacts are coming from outside the system." On the main screen, Zarathel had stopped speaking and was looking at something off-camera. Her expression had changed from welcoming to alarmed. Other alien representatives were moving around quickly, and Captain Torres could hear voices speaking in languages that the translation system could not identify. "Captain Torres," Zarathel said, turning back to face the screen. "You need to prepare your ships for combat immediately. We are detecting void feeders approaching your position." "Void feeders?" Captain Torres asked. "What are those?" Before Zarathel could answer, the first attack came. Something passed through. The hull of the Liberty, like it was made of air rather than metal and ceramic. Captain Torres felt a cold presence move past her, and then Lieutenant Johnson screamed. Maya was aging rapidly, her young face wrinkling and her dark hair turning gray, then white. In seconds, she went from 25 years old to what looked like 60. She collapsed at her station, still alive but weak and confused. "Battle stations!" Captain Torres shouted, but she did not know what they were supposed to fight. All around the bridge, similar scenes were happening. Crew members were being drained of life and energy by invisible attackers that could not be seen or touched. The ship's lights flickered as the electrical systems were also being drained. Through the view screen, Captain Torres could see that the other human ships were under attack as well. The alien fleet was moving to help, and she could see elf warriors on some of the ships fighting the attackers with weapons that glowed with strange light. A young elf woman materialized on the Liberty's bridge using some kind of teleportation technology. She was tall and athletic, with white hair tied back for combat and armor that seemed to be made of living metal. In her hands, she carried weapons that looked like swords but glowed with energy. "Where are your crew quarters?" the elf woman demanded. "Deck 5 through 7, Captain Torres replied, still trying to understand what was happening. The elf woman ran toward the nearest elevator, her weapons ready. "Keep your people together and away from the outer hull," she called back. "These creatures cannot drain large groups as easily as individuals." Captain Torres activated the ship's emergency systems. "All hands, this is the captain. Report to designated safe areas immediately. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. This is not a drill. For the next 20 minutes, the battle raged throughout the human fleet. The void feeders moved through, ships like ghosts, draining crew members and ship systems. Human weapons were completely useless against enemies they could not see or touch. Only the elf warriors seemed able to fight the creatures, using techniques and weapons that worked on beings that existed partially outside normal space. When the attack finally ended, the void feeders simply vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. Captain Torres looked around her bridge at the survivors, many of whom had aged years in minutes. Lieutenant Johnson was still alive, but would never be the same young officer she had been an hour before. "Damage report," Captain Torres ordered. The news was terrible. 3 human ships had lost all power and were drifting dead in space. Casualty reports were still coming in, but it was clear that hundreds of people had been affected by the life-draining attack. Worst of all, this had been just a small group of attackers compared to what the aliens said was coming. Zarathel's image appeared on the main screen again. "Captain Torres, I am very sorry for what happened to your people. The attack you just experienced was only a scouting force. The main swarm is much larger and is headed directly toward your home system." Captain Torres felt cold fear settle in her stomach. "How long do we have?" "Based on their current speed, approximately 6 weeks before they reach Earth." "Can your people help us fight them?" Zarathel nodded. "We will do everything we can, but you must understand that this enemy nearly destroyed my people thousands of years ago. They are very difficult to fight, and they become stronger with each victim they drain." Captain Torres looked at her damaged bridge and her injured crew. If this small attack had caused so much damage, what would happen when the main force reached Earth with its billions of people? "What do we need to do?" she asked. "First, we get your survivors to safety and repair your ships," Zarathel replied. "Then we begin preparing for the most important battle in human history." As the human and alien fleets began working together to deal with the aftermath of the attack, Captain Torres realized that first contact had not gone at all the way anyone had planned. Instead of peaceful ceremonies and cultural exchange, humanity had been thrown into a war for survival against an enemy they did not understand. The warning had come too late, and now they would all pay the price. General Susan Clark arrived at the Emergency Command Center 3 days after the first contact disaster, her face grim with the weight of what Earth was facing. She had been pulled from retirement to take charge of humanity's defense against an enemy that could walk through walls and drain the life from people in seconds. As she looked at the reports from the attack, she knew that everything humans thought they knew about warfare was about to become useless. The command center had been set up on Luna Station, orbiting Earth's moon, and was now filled with both human and alien personnel working together frantically. Maps showing the movement of void feeder swarms covered the walls, and communication systems buzzed constantly with updates from scouts and evacuation ships throughout human space. Dr. Terra Lee stood at a workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing dimensional mathematics that would have been impossible to understand just weeks before. She was working with alien scientists to develop weapons that could affect beings that existed partially outside normal space-time. Her dark hair was messy from long hours of work, and her eyes were red from staring at complex equations. But she was making progress. "General Clark," Dr. Lee called as she approached. "I think we have found something that might work." "General." Clark moved to look at the displays, though most of the mathematics was beyond her understanding. "Explain it in simple terms." "The void feeders exist in multiple dimensions at once," Dr. Lee said, manipulating the holographic display to show a simplified model. "That is why our normal weapons pass right through them. But if we can create dimensional anchors, we can force them to exist completely in our normal space, making them vulnerable to conventional attacks." An elf woman approached them, her robes marking her as one of the high-ranking magic users who had come to help. This was Nixandra, an ancient battle mage who had studied void feeder combat techniques for centuries. Her silver hair was streaked with black, and her eyes held the weight of terrible knowledge. "The theory is sound," Nixandra said, "but creating dimensional anchors requires a combination of technology and magical energy that has never been attempted before. It will be very dangerous." "How dangerous?" General Clark asked. "The process could tear holes in space-time itself," Nixandra replied. If we make a mistake, we could destroy entire star systems. Dr. Lee nodded grimly. But if we do nothing, the void feeders will drain all life from human space anyway. We have to take the risk. General Clark studied the projections showing void feeder movements. The main swarm was still 5 weeks away from Earth, but smaller groups were already attacking human colonies throughout the outer systems. Each attack made the creatures stronger and gave them more energy to continue their advance. What do you need to make this work? General Clark asked. Time, resources, and test subjects, Dr. Lee replied. We need to capture some void feeders so we can experiment on them safely. Nixandra shook her head. Void feeders cannot be captured in the normal sense. They are not fully physical beings. But there is another way. She led them to a different section of the command center where Zarathel and Commander Lisa Hayes were, coordinating evacuation efforts. Lisa looked exhausted from the constant work of trying to save human colonies before the void feeders reached them. But she looked up when they approached. We have managed to evacuate 12 colonies so far, Lisa reported. But there are 43 more in the projected path of the swarm, and we do not have enough ships to save them all. General Clark felt the weight of command pressing down on her. Every decision she made would affect millions of lives, and there were no good choices available. Nixandra has an idea for testing our new weapons, Dr. Lee said. Tell them what? You told me. Nixandra looked uncomfortable, but she explained her plan. There is a technique that can summon individual void feeders for short periods. It is extremely dangerous and requires a living sacrifice of magical energy, but it would allow us to test the dimensional anchors in a controlled environment. What kind of sacrifice? General Clark asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. A magic user must give up their life force to power the summoning, Nixandra said quietly. The process will drain them the same way a void feeder attack would, but it can be controlled and limited. The command center became very quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. To test their weapons, someone would have to volunteer to die. We'll do it, Nixandra continued. I am old, and I have studied these creatures longer than anyone else alive. My sacrifice will have the most value. Dr. Lee started to protest, but Nixandra held up her hand. This is the only way, the elf mage said. Without testing, the dimensional anchors might fail when we need them most. Better to lose one life now than billions later. General Clark looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people, human and alien alike, were all willing to sacrifice everything to stop the void feeders. It reminded her why she had chosen a military career in the first place, to protect those who could not protect themselves. When can we do the test? She asked. Tomorrow, Nixandra replied. I need time to prepare the summoning circle and gather the necessary magical components. The next day, representatives from multiple species gathered in a specially prepared chamber deep inside Luna Station. The room had been equipped with Dr. Lee's experimental dimensional anchor devices, along with every type of weapon that might be effective against void feeders. Emergency containment systems were ready in case something went wrong. Nixandra stood in the center of a complex magical circle drawn on the floor with symbols that seemed to move and shift when viewed directly. She had changed into simple white robes and carried no weapons or protective gear. Are you certain about this? Zarathel asked her friend. I am certain, Nixandra replied. My people have run from these creatures for too long. It is time to learn how to fight them properly. Dr. Lee activated the dimensional anchor devices, and immediately the air in the chamber began to shimmer, with strange energy. The mathematical equations she had been working on for days were finally being put to the test. Nixandra began chanting in the ancient elf language, her voice growing stronger as the magical energy built up around her. The symbols on the floor began to glow, and reality itself seemed to bend and twist in response to her will. Then the void feeder appeared. It was a thing of shadow and hunger, barely visible but radiating cold and emptiness. Under normal circumstances, it would have been immune to physical attacks, but the dimensional anchors were working. The creature was forced to exist completely in normal space, making it solid and vulnerable. Now, Dr. Lee shouted. Weapons fire filled the chamber as human and alien soldiers tested every type of attack they could think of. Energy weapons, projectile weapons, and even some experimental devices created specifically for this test. The void feeder. writhed and screamed as the attacks actually affected it for the first time in its existence. But the cost was exactly what Nyxandra had predicted. As she maintained the summoning and the dimensional anchors, her life force was being drained away. Her hair turned white, then gray, then began falling out. Her face aged decades in minutes. "It is working," she called out, her voice becoming weaker. "The anchors make them vulnerable. Remember this." The Void Feeder finally died under the concentrated attacks, dissolving into nothing as the magical energy holding it in place disappeared. Nyxandra collapsed to the floor, her body aged to the point of death. But she was smiling. "Now you know how to fight them," she whispered, before her eyes closed forever. Dr. Lee immediately began analyzing the data from the test. The dimensional anchors had worked perfectly, but they required enormous amounts of energy to maintain. Scaling up the technology to affect an entire swarm would require resources that humanity did not have. "We need a bigger power source," Dr. Lee said, studying the energy readings. "Something on the scale of a star or a planet's core." "General." Clark looked at the data and understood the implication. To defeat the Void Feeder swarm, they would need to sacrifice something enormous. The question was what they could afford to lose. "The moon," she said quietly. "What?" Dr. Lee asked. "We use Luna as the power source," General Clark explained. "It is big enough to power the dimensional anchors for the entire swarm, and losing it would not make Earth uninhabitable." Lisa stared at her in shock. "You want to destroy the moon?" "I want to save Earth," General Clark replied. "Nyxandra died to show us how to fight these things. We cannot waste her sacrifice." As they began planning the most desperate gamble in human history, reports continued to come in from the outer colonies. The Void Feeder swarm was getting closer to Earth every day, growing stronger with each attack. Soon they would arrive at humanity's home system and the final battle would begin. Nyxandra's sacrifice had given them a weapon, but using it would require a sacrifice almost as great as the threat they were fighting. The choice was simple: lose the moon or lose everything. Admiral Nina Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the flagship Humanity's Hope, watching as the largest fleet in human history assembled around Earth's solar system. Ships from dozens of alien species had come to help, creating a massive armada that stretched from Mercury's orbit to beyond Mars. The sight would have been inspiring if everyone had not known they were preparing for a battle that would determine the survival of all organic life in the galaxy. The Void Feeder swarm had arrived exactly when predicted, a dark cloud of hunger and death that blocked out stars as it approached. Scout reports indicated that the main force contained thousands of individual creatures, far more than had ever been encountered before. Each one was capable of draining the life from dozens of people in minutes, and they had grown stronger by consuming entire colonies during their journey to Earth. Dr. Tara Lee worked frantically at her station, making final adjustments to the dimensional anchor network that had been installed throughout the solar system. The technology that had cost Nyxandra her life was now their only hope of making the Void Feeders vulnerable to attack. Every calculation had to be perfect, because they would only get one chance. "Anchor network status?" Admiral Rodriguez asked. "All stations are online and synchronized," Dr. Lee replied, her voice tight with stress. "But I cannot guarantee the network will hold once we activate it. The power requirements are beyond anything we have ever attempted." At the center of the solar system, Luna had been converted into the largest weapon in human history. The moon's core had been replaced with a massive fusion reactor that would provide the energy needed to power the dimensional anchors. When activated, the explosion would destroy Luna completely, but it would also force every Void Feeder in the system to exist fully in normal space for approximately 1 hour. General Susan Clark coordinated ground-based defenses from Earth's surface, knowing that some Void Feeders would likely break through the fleet and reach the planet itself. Every major city had been evacuated to underground shelters, and volunteer defense forces had been equipped with weapons designed to work against dimensionally anchored enemies. In the alien fleet, Zarathel commanded a mixed force of elf warriors and human soldiers who had trained together for the past month. The cooperation between species had been remarkable, with humans adapting alien fighting techniques while aliens learned to use human technology. The cultural exchange that should have happened during peaceful first contact was instead taking place in preparation for war. Commander Lisa Hayes piloted a fast attack ship equipped with experimental weapons, leading a squadron of volunteer pilots who would attempt to strike at the heart of the Void Feeder swarm. Her ship carried one of the most dangerous weapons ever created, a device that could create temporary rifts in space-time to trap Void Feeders in dimensional pockets. Using it would probably destroy her ship, but it might also eliminate hundreds of enemies at once. The battle began when the Void Feeder swarm reached the outer edge of the solar system. The first wave of attackers struck the alien fleet positioned near Pluto's orbit, and immediately the advantages and disadvantages of the dimensional anchor plan became clear. When Dr. Lee activated the anchor network, reality itself seemed to shiver throughout the entire solar system. The Void Feeders, suddenly forced to exist completely in normal space, became visible as massive, writhing creatures of shadow and hunger. For the first time in galactic history, conventional weapons could hurt them. The combined fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, projectile weapons, and exotic alien technologies all struck home against enemies that had previously been untouchable. Void Feeders died by the dozens, their death screams echoing across multiple dimensions. But the cost was immediate and terrible. Luna's fusion reactor was consuming the moon's mass at an incredible rate, and the gravitational effects were already causing tidal chaos on Earth. Worse, the dimensional anchors were creating instabilities in space-time that threatened to tear holes in reality itself. Network stability at 60% and falling, Dr. Lee reported. We have maybe 40 minutes before complete system failure. Admiral Rodriguez watched the tactical display as the battle raged across the solar system. The alien fleet was taking heavy casualties, but they were also inflicting serious damage on the Void Feeder swarm. Human pilots were proving their reputation for adaptability and stubbornness, refusing to retreat even when their ships were badly damaged. In the thick of the fighting, Zarathel's command ship was attacked by a group of Void Feeders that had broken through the front lines. Even anchored in normal space, the creatures were incredibly dangerous, using their ability to drain life force as a weapon. Elf warriors fought them hand-to-hand using enchanted weapons, while human soldiers provided covering fire with weapons that finally worked against their ancient enemy. "Zarathel to all ships," came the transmission. "We are seeing increased Void Feeder activity near Earth's moon. They seem to be targeting the reactor." Dr. Lee checked her readings and felt her blood run cold. "They know what we are doing. They are trying to destroy the reactor before it can complete the fusion process. If the Void Feeders reached Luna before the reactor finished its work, the dimensional anchors would fail and the creatures would become untouchable again. The entire battle plan depended on the reactor completing its devastating task. Admiral Rodriguez made the hardest decision of her career. All ships. New priority target. Protect Luna at all costs, even if it means letting the main swarm through." The fleet repositioned itself around Earth's moon, creating a defensive barrier that would hopefully buy enough time for the reactor to finish its work. Ships that had been built for exploration and diplomacy found themselves in desperate combat with enemies that defied everything humans thought they knew about physics. Commander Lisa Hayes received special orders as the situation became more desperate. "Lisa, we need you to take your ship directly into the center of the swarm. Use the dimensional rift weapon to create as much chaos as possible." Lisa looked at her crew, all volunteers who knew they were probably not coming back. "Understood. Admiral, it has been an honor serving with you all." Her small ship accelerated toward the heart of the Void Feeder swarm, dodging attacks from creatures that moved like living shadows through space. When she reached the center of the enemy formation, she activated the dimensional rift weapon. The explosion tore a hole in space-time itself, creating a vortex that pulled hundreds of Void Feeders into a pocket dimension where they would be trapped forever. But the weapon's activation also destroyed Lisa's ship, adding another hero to the growing list of those who had given their lives for humanity's survival. As the battle reached its climax, Luna's reactor finally achieved critical mass. The explosion was visible from across the solar system, a brilliant flash that marked the complete destruction of Earth's moon. But it also provided the energy surge that the dimensional anchor network needed to affect the entire Void Feeder swarm simultaneously. Every remaining Void Feeder in the solar system was suddenly locked into normal space, unable to phase through. attacks or drain energy from their victims. The combined fleet concentrated all their firepower on the anchored enemies, and within minutes, the ancient threat that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was finally destroyed. The victory came at a terrible cost. Luna was gone, its destruction affecting Earth's tides and weather patterns in ways that would take years to fully understand. Hundreds of ships had been lost, and thousands of brave souls from multiple species had given their lives in the battle. But humanity had proven something important that day. When faced with extinction, they had not run or surrendered. Instead, they had found a way to fight an enemy that had been considered unbeatable, and they had done it by working together with alien allies who had become true friends. 6 months later, Admiral Rachel Torres, promoted after surviving the first contact disaster, stood on the bridge of the new flagship Terra's Dawn. Her ship was part of the first truly integrated human-alien fleet, with crew members from dozens of different species working together as equals. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the Andromeda system. They say they heard about what happened here and want to thank humanity for defeating the Void Feeders." Admiral Torres smiled, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed as dark and empty as they once had. The warning had come too late to prevent the battle, but it had not come too late to save the galaxy. Humanity had found its place among the stars not through peaceful diplomacy, but through courage in the face of impossible odds. And in doing so, they had earned the respect and friendship of species across the galaxy who would never forget the day that humans chose to sacrifice their own moon to save all organic life. The Void Feeders were gone, but the story of humanity's determination had just begun.